Welcome. I'm Cindy Bensley-Gertz, creator of Conscious Living Arts, the Vibrant Woman Program, and Inspired Menopause. Welcome to my series, Vibrant Voices. So last year in 2021, I did a series of interviews featuring 6 of my students. This year, I decided I wanted to interview my fellow businesswomen. Part of that inspiration is that I took a look at my own community, and 75% of the clients or students that I work with right now are business owners, female business owners, either as their full-time income or a substantial commitment to their family sustainability. And in business, they say 90% of working on yourself or 90% of working on your business is working on yourself. So my intention for these interviews is to inspire them and the other women out there who are going to be watching. So today I have with me my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Maureen Murphy, chiropractor and women's resilience coach. She is also the creator of Soul Spark, Women's Connecting Circles, and the May Day Resilience Kit. Welcome, Maureen.
Thank you so much, Cindy. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, likewise. This is going to be so much fun. So first of all, I love the word resilience, and I see that as a quality that vibrant women and extraordinary women, which you call in on your website, possess. So let's start by having you tell us your story. How did May Day Resilience come to be, and how did your own healing journey inform your choice to build this business?
Yes, thank you. That's such a great question, Cindy. I love the word resilience too. It has a bounce to it, doesn't it? Reminds me a little bit of a slinky, which brought up a lot of joy as children. Well, in my work as a chiropractor and a neurology specialist, people were always talking about stress and stress reduction and all of that. And I didn't like the word stress. I didn't think that you could eliminate stress. I saw the usefulness of stress in human beings evolutionarily. And I much preferred working towards something rather than being against something, right? So resilience was a word that I was drawn to many years ago. And as I kind of recovered from my own challenges of being a business owner, a woman business owner, and going through menopause and the challenges that that brought up for me physically, emotionally, mentally, I realized that resilience was something that was holistic and included spirituality, included the spirit and the soul, for vibrancy, for health, as well as the physical body and the emotional body. So that was attractive to me. And how May Day Resilience came about is I was sorting for a name for my coaching practice. And I was having trouble finding one that wasn't already taken, that was meaningful to me. So I kind of said a prayer to find a name that was inspiring and meaningful to me, that would have sort of an energetic structure to it. And as I was meditating up in the Berkeley Hills, actually on Labor Day with my partner Marco, this name came to me, May Day. May Day, and I realized and did a little research about that. May Day is a Celtic festival celebrating the end of winter and the beginning of summer, and it's full of vibrancy and color and renewal and creativity and connection. And May Day is also the international distress signal, if you remember. May Day, we're going down, right? When I looked into it, I discovered that May Day came from the French word m'aider, which means help me, and it was chosen by an English speaker who was given the challenge when there was first airline travel between England and France to come up with something that would be easily memorable. And so mostly it was for English and French speakers. So he came up with May Day, and that became the signal. Um, Initially, resilience and resilience skills were designed to help women professionals, particularly caring professionals, to avoid, prevent, or recover from burnout, which is something that many of us do experience, and I certainly have experienced it myself. And so the idea was to come full circle from distress to refreshed. And that was kind of a fun, energetic that infused the name for me.
Oh, I love that. I love so much of what you just said. Moving from distress to refresh, Mayday. Oh, what a fun story. And I love all of the little connections in there. And I really loved in the beginning when you said you wanted to move towards something. So that idea of being drawn towards something, this is just such a perfect segue into my next question, because you and I mean, we were drawn together as business buddies.
Mhm.
And that was about 10 years ago. And we
Mhm.
work with a similar population, midlife women. And as my audience knows, but maybe yours doesn't, I'm working on helping women navigate the changes and challenges of perimenopause and menopause. So my ears kind of perked up when you mentioned, going through menopause. And your focus has been, as you mentioned, on supporting women caring professionals. So can you define caring professionals for us and tell us a little bit more about the women that you help? What
Sure.
keep, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. I know we've both been interested in what are the concerns of the women that we work with, understanding what keeps them up at night and what their dreams and aspirations are. Yeah, that's a big important um, question to ask our women so that we know how best to serve them. And I know that in our hearts, that's our ultimate goal, is to be of service. And therefore, caring professionals who you could say are healers, leaders, advocates, teachers. That's primarily who I work with, or anybody who's professionally or in their family supporting and uplifting other people. And what I've noticed, particularly with women, several things. One is that the sensitivities that they have and their gift of empathy is what initially draws them to work in those fields. So they spend so much of their adult time supporting and helping other people because they care, because they feel deeply and they have empathy. However, very often we've been conditioned not to knit ourselves into that circle of caring. It's like we're standing outside that, supporting everyone else, and we forget that we need to receive before we can give, or we need to give and then receive. And it's not a one to one, it's not this way, it goes around in a circle. So I might give over here, but receive somewhere else. And so that's um, an opening in consciousness, an opening of your heart, an opening of your willingness to be vulnerable, right? To stay
Mm,
open. So
yeah,
that's a part of it.
love
So
that.
in professional schools, we're not really taught how to do that sustainably, right? We're not taught that this sensitivity is actually a gift that needs to be cared for, that it needs to be nurtured, it needs to be developed so that there are, for example, healthy boundaries and healthy giving and receiving to prevent burnout.
Yeah, I love that. I often tell the women that I work with that we have been so trained to give, give, give that we've forgotten to do what we naturally um, embody as receptivity. So we have to learn how to receive because we can't give from an empty cup.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And a lot of times women have these resilience skills, but they don't apply them everywhere. And they may be unconscious of their skillfulness and not realize that they can apply it to different areas. Or through conditioning, there may be a certain area where they're prevented from applying them because of unconscious beliefs and patterns of coping, like people pleasing, for example.
Yes. Okay. So this is a great lead into my next question because I want to hear more about these 7 resilient skills. And actually, I've heard a lot about them because you and I have been meeting weekly for the last 10 years. We've assisted each other at our events and we've even presented together at the same events. So do tell us a little bit more about the 7 resilient skills that help women flourish. Can you name each one of them and give us just like one little insight or snippet about each one?
Sure. And first, I just want to say how much I've benefited from our weekly connections, both professionally and personally. They've been very holistic. I don't have to leave a part of myself out when I'm working on my business with Cindy. We hold a lot for one another, and that is such a gift and something that I highly recommend that women going through menopause or women in general do find someone in their lives or several people that they can relate to honestly. Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. Finding
Yeah.
that I call them practice partners. Our mentor called them business buddies. And yeah, whether you're starting a business or going through menopause, whatever it is. Okay, so tell us more about these resilient
Yeah.
skills.
So the 7 essential resilience skills came about because I personally had experienced a low point and a burnout right around the time of perimenopause. So I know it was like a perfect storm of different things. And I really needed a spiritual upgrade. That was really, I was breaking down physically. Digestive problems, poor sleeping. I was eating a beautiful diet, but my blood work was coming back as though I was malnourished. So there was the difficulty absorbing the nutrients. And I realized that there was a spiritual component to my malaise. And so I wanted to develop something that would answer the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual needs of women. And I used the structure. I like to use structure, just like in yoga. Structure supports freedom. So I used the structure of a 7 petal mandala that I had created. And in the center of the mandala, I put the qualities that I wanted to experience and express and offer to my clients. And in the petals, emerged these 7 essential resilience skills, which also, in my mind, were related to the energetic structure of the physical chakras. So the foundation would be boundaries, and specifically that you can modulate boundaries. It's not an all or nothing proposition, right? That boundaries are areas of connection as well as protection. It doesn't have to isolate you. The second one, which really applies to women in menopause, is sourcing sustainable energy. And that requires you to be aware of the sources of energy that you're already using. And you might be surprised to find that you're using caffeine or you're using adrenaline, stimulated by urgency or criticism, right? So that certainly was the case for me. I was experiencing adrenal burnout for lots of reasons. And that affected my hormones, affected my thyroid, affected my estrogen and progesterone because they all work together. So if you're coming into menopause and you're already distressed, then it's going to be harder for you to manage that fluctuation in your hormones. Okay, so energy. So then the third one is a skillful use of personal power. Now, it might surprise you that the most dangerous kind of power is power that's not utilized, right? If you think about a garden hose that the water is going through full tilt, but no one is holding on to it, you're going to get one of these things and everyone's going to get wet. Or think about a classroom situation where the teacher is not in command of the group, and how uncomfortable it is for the students and how they start to act out their discomfort, and then nobody is really learning. The fourth and very, very important one that I really focus on in the Soul Spark Women's Connecting Circles is connecting from the heart. And we practice the skill of relational presence, how to be yourself and be fully present in the company of others. And this is harder than walking and talking and chewing gum. This is being able to remain present even when you're uncomfortable, and noticing or making the distinction between how you're going to cope with that discomfort by maybe people pleasing, trying to be perfect, trying to look good, shutting down, isolating, right? So these are the ways we cope with our discomfort, but there's actually a skill in there that you can learn that helps you to be fully present, where you can access not only your personal power, but your insight and your intuition and your intelligence. So the fifth essential resilience skill is integrity. And by that, there's structural integrity, but there's also integrity, like knowing what your core values are and what are your guiding principles, and being conscious of that. And how can you utilize those when you need to make decisions that are not that easy? Decisions where there might be two good possibilities, or do no harm in one instance, right? Difficult decisions that adults have to face on a regular basis. If you have alignment with your core values and guiding principles, and you have conscious awareness of those, then it's much easier. And you connect that with your embodiment and your intuition, then you'll be able to make decisions that actually the outcomes are more sustainable. The sixth, and really a very, very powerful and necessary one for me, was perspective shifting. When I learned that the truth of my experience lay in my interpretation, and that I had the power to make up the meaning, that events, in fact, don't have a meaning by themselves. I don't need to be sorting and looking out there to discover the meaning. The meaning is what I make it. And if I'm not aware of that, I'm going to make the meaning based on my unconscious conditioning and thoughts about myself or the world, whether it's the world is not safe, or mistakes are bad, or I'm not good enough, right? So these are some of the unconscious beliefs that we use to form our interpretations. And it was very liberating to learn and then practice, um, knowing that I could make up the interpretations that best served me. The seventh resilience skill is one I know, Cindy, that's close to your heart, which is receptivity. And I know that your focus on restorative yoga practices really help us to build that ability, and that it's one of the greatest qualities of the divine feminine that we awaken in our work together. So those are the seven essential resilience skills. And when I work with women, I help them to assess using the Mayday Resilience Kit and a resilience assessment, where they get to see where they may be challenged in their resilience skills development, and also where they're pretty good already. So we can focus on using their strengths and leveraging those to help them overcome and develop any areas that are not strong enough.
Whew, that was great, Maureen. Thank you. And so I was thinking all along, how are these women going to get their hands on these 7 resilience tools? And I know you're going to tell them how to do that at the end of our conversation, and how to stay in touch with you. And there's so many things that struck me about what you were saying. So one of my questions for you was going to be, what are the 1 or 2 skills that you see women going through perimenopause and menopause need the most? And you talked about sourcing sustainable energy. And yeah, the number one thing I see women dealing with is that fatigue. But I also starred 3 others. Relational presence, the idea of showing up fully as yourself and remaining present. That is just so important as we create a new legacy around menopause, and we come together to share stories of how it was, and create new stories about how we want it to be, which leads directly into that perspective shifting and making a choice of, this might be the legacy that was handed down to us. And these are the things we've believed and we've heard, and we've adopted them as our own stories. But we can tell our kids a whole new story if we want. We have that power, and it's an important and powerful passage. And then the whole idea of receptivity. I forgot that receptivity was one of your 7 resilience skills, and that's actually my word for the year. So, which
Mhm.
kind of dovetails into this idea, in my circles, the way we come up with our words is, every time we meet in the month, we work on a different quality or a different theme, a quality or a strength of the divine feminine that we want to nurture and cultivate and embody. And I pair each quality with a different divine feminine presence. And so in our last circle of the year, we pick cards based on our power word. So one of my questions for you is, if you were to pair the idea of resilience, with a divine feminine presence, you know, what would that be?
Yeah, thank you. I love the divine feminine presence, and I love the question of what is that? Like that, there's not one set answer. It's something that I'm feeling into and curious about and tracking all the time. Um, for me, receptivity is a quality of the divine feminine. It is that uterus. It is those open arms welcoming you. So that would be a strong one for me. Also connecting from the heart and just thinking of the heart space as another welcoming space, an embracing space. Um, I would say those are the two that I think of the most when I think of the divine feminine as relates to the 7 essential skills. But the mandala itself is a feminine form, and at the heart of it is your intention and the qualities that you want to evoke, experience, and express in your imagination, in your cells, in your environment. It's the vibration that you offer. And that's what magnetizes the life that you want. That's what draws you in. I'm sure it's what drew us to one another, was our intention to connect and be real and find a way to sustainably live while supporting the women that we work with and
Mm,
creating. We helped each other create curriculum. We workshopped our ideas with one another. We offered each other guiding questions, which unlocked, all kinds of things. So, yeah, it's been a real pleasure, this journey of more than 10 years, I think. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, and you mentioned the word connection, and I want to take a little side journey and venture into a new territory you're working with, and I just kind of want to set that up. Um, you know, this might be a little bit edgy, but we've been through a few rough years, rife with the pandemic and contentious politics, and now a war that Russia's waging on the Ukraine. That's a huge worry on a global scale, and the anxiety is palpable. And we can feel like there's a lot of disconnection. I read an opinion in the New York Times recently that proposed that anxiety, which I think we feel a lot of when we're not feeling connected, that brings up fear, is a luxury feeling reserved for the privileged. And reading that just really struck me hard, right in my heart. And I had to really look at that and examine that. And I know that you've been immersed in a very intensive meditation teacher training this last year that also has a social and racial justice component to it.
Mhm.
So how do you respond when you hear a statement like that? And how can we as privileged women honor our own feelings, hold space for others who are suffering, and continue to be vibrant and flourishing all at the same time?
Wow, Cindy, that is so complex and so beautiful. I love the multifaceted nature of that and the inclusive nature of that. And there's so many ways I could answer it. um, Thank you so much for that question. First of all, for the opportunity to describe a little bit about this diversity, equity, inclusivity, and accessibility training that I'm undergoing. Just to say that I'm in a 2-year meditation teacher training with Tara Brock and Jack Cornfield. And on the first day of our training, they introduced a new part of the curriculum, which was this diversity, equity, inclusivity, and accessibility training. And my immediate response was to burst into tears because I hadn't even known how much I wanted it, how much I wanted to be led into this arena that was scary, right? Emotionally scary, almost like a landmine, like you're afraid you're going to step in it or step on it and hurt somebody or hurt yourself. And we're living through a time where so much that has been unconscious and out of our regular everyday mindset coming to the fore. Racial inequality, economic inequality, um, corruption, you know, all kinds of things are coming up for us to see. And in my experience, we need to have the spiritual fortitude and the spiritual fitness to know difficult things. And that is part of resilience training, right? And it's part of the benefit of mindfulness practice. The benefit of yoga practice is like you're strengthening your mind, body, and spirit so that you can live in the world as it is. The world is not all sunshine and rainbows, but neither is it all darkness and gloom, right? So the idea and the benefit of our practices is that we can expand our capacity to know difficult things and to hold them in balance. And that does take intention and attention, and it takes practice, right? As you've already mentioned. Um, so this luxury feeling can be very edgy, as you say, because it can evoke feelings of guilt, of shame, of powerlessness, of frustration, of confusion, right? And so one way that I answer that is to know that it's not all or nothing. We can have multiple feelings. We do have multiple feelings, and we maybe need to learn how to identify them, how to make space for them, how to let them arise and fall away so that we don't identify as those feelings, so that we can allow that complexity and that can color and shape our life, just like a painting that has light and shadow. So that would be one thing. The second thing, then, really important skill that I learned in this training is how much more effective it is to call people in rather than call them out. And we live, cancel culture is a thing right now. And so there's a lot of people pointing fingers and shaming people. And in my experience, that shuts down the heart, it puts up the defenses, and it prevents us from learning, right? So um, part of the training that I've gone through includes awareness of construction of different realities like race and such, but also we get together in small groups and we workshop what we're learning so that there's a safe space for our contradictory feelings, right? So we can talk about what's difficult, so we can begin that process. And I'm really just at the beginning, but I've learned so much. I can see so much, and I'm willing, because of the cohort that I'm with, to engage in ways that I might have just gone before, right? So it's an intention that I have, and then it's practice, it's learning and practice, and it's doing it in a way where I recognize that uh, just like you learn a dance step, you're not going to be good at it in the beginning, but you have to get through that stage in order to enjoy it later on, right? Um, Not doing it alone. This work is not to be done alone. It's too hard to get caught up in the negative self-talk and start beating yourself up, right? So those are some ways. And then that question that you asked about, how can privileged women honor their feelings, honor their knowledge that there is suffering, and continue to live sustainably, vibrantly, and flourishing. That's really the task and the question that women ask all the time. in my experience. It's really trying to find that. And it starts really with compassion, compassion for yourself, compassion that you're a work in progress, um, compassion for the conditioning that you were raised in, empowering yourself with knowledge, connecting with other people for practice. So, you know, the Buddha talks about taking refuge in the teachings, but also in the community, in the Sangha, right? So you resource yourself. Um,
Yeah. Mm.
those are some of the ways that I would answer that. And then, of course, there's loads of ways we talk about resourcing ourselves with rest and time in nature and um, meditate.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue into my next question was really bringing it back to your meditation training, and you are in the middle of a big move this year. So I know it's been intense. So how have you applied the resilience skills to your own experience? Are there one or two that you leaned into the most that you want to share with us?
Mm. Yeah, as you mentioned, it has been a big year. I closed my chiropractic practice of 30 years at the end of last year, actually the middle of last year, and we're packing up as we speak. You might notice the empty room behind me. We're moving from Berkeley, where we've lived for 35 years, to a new life in San Miguel de Allende in Mexico, a new language, a new culture. It's quite a big deal, and the universe has both given us a nudge and also welcomed us. So it's the push pull that we're responding to. And I would have to say, taking it a day at a time is really important, and leaning into the practices of that I have of journaling, mindful movement, um, um, meditation practice, stillness, connecting in community, having one or two really important people in your life that you can uh, connect with to feel your feelings. Because sometimes I know one of my coping strategies is to isolate. And so I have to overcome that and recognize that solitude is wonderful and very often helps me reset and come into alignment. But there's a fine line between that and isolating, at which point my negative self talk and my negative coping strategies are going to get activated. So it's about awareness, it's about practice, it's about um, for me, there, I haven't been able to do any single one of them all the time. I just thought, what can I do now? Maybe it's just being mindful while I'm doing the dishes, or mindfully walking to my car, or mindfully, um, connecting and listening. Actually, find working with clients to be extremely beneficial because I'm fully present. And so it's almost like a resting place when you come into full presence. Mhm.
Oh yeah, I can totally relate to that. I love so much of what you've said, the compassion that's, ahimsa that's at the heart of yoga, being able to hold multiple feelings at once, this idea that it's not this or that or either or, or all or nothing, that it's so complex. I love that idea of calling in versus calling out. And then the whole idea of push pull. And I like to think of this idea of, we think of tension in a very negative way most of the time, but tension really is a force that holds everything together. If we didn't have tension, everything would just blow apart or it would go into a
Right.
pile of mush, right?
Mhm. Yeah. And bringing it back to the change, right, and what women go through in midlife, and everyone goes through it differently, and there's no right or wrong way to go through it. There are just opportunities that will present themselves based on your learning trajectory and your soul and spirit's growth. These are just opportunities. If it's a health crisis, or a change in family or job or location, any of these things are changes. So how do you relate to change?
Yeah.
And we've talked often, Cindy, about the loss of the rhythm of the monthly rhythm, and knowing yourself. Okay, I'm going to have cravings for 3 days, or I'm going to be moody for 2 days, and then, this is going to happen. And then you're in perimenopause and all bets are off. There's no rhythm that you can find in it. The blues go on for the whole month or not, or, there's just a variety of things that happen. So I have found replacing that with an intentional rhythm, a weekly rhythm or a daily rhythm with my practices, is then that rhythm holds me energetically.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful idea that I've actually borrowed from you time and time again. I remember distinctly having that conversation about losing my own rhythm and you planting the seed that I could create my own rhythm. And the saying goes, the only constant in life is change. So when we know that we have within ourselves the power to create our own rhythm, it makes a huge difference. And it brings us back to that, a rhythm is like a boundary, right? A routine, it's like a boundary. It brings us right back to your first skill. And I think what you said, that it was something about, I wrote it down. I don't know if I can find it anymore. Structure supports freedom. And the word that came to me immediately after that was fluidity. And we need that structure then to be able to be free to create,
Right.
and to safely be in relationship.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Oh.
Mhm.
Okay. So I think I have just one or two more really juicy questions for you, because there was
Okay.
there was one thing that really caught my attention in a blog that you wrote. You wrote, as a chiropractor, I am well aware of the architecture of our body-mind relationships. I notice that most of us make demands on our bodies and expect them to follow through. That is an example of a hierarchical relationship, and it works until an injury, illness, or simply the aging process reverses that relationship. And I might add, perimenopause. Then your body is dictating what you can and cannot do. It's still a hierarchy, only now you are on the bottom. How would your life be different if you had a true partnership with your body? So I really love that insight. And as a trained yoga teacher, I also keep the body mind relationship at the forefront. So how do we, as practitioners of yoga and meditation, support that partnership? What does that look like when our minds and bodies are in partnership and not in this hierarchical relationship?
Mhm. Yeah, I think the first step in any journey is really awareness. So just like with looking at what you source, what's the source of your energy that you're using, just recognizing what is the quality of my relationship with my body? What's the quality and tenor of my inner dialogue? How do I speak to myself in my own head? Do I listen when my body is tired? Or do I push through? Just some examples, right? Um, and do I wake refreshed? Is my body trying to tell me something there? Also, I think your dreams paying attention to your dreams can tell you something about your relationship with your body. Um, so that's the first step, I guess. And then the second is to intend to be kind, to be friendly towards your body and towards whatever you find. If you find that your relationship is a negative, mean relationship, then be kind about that awareness. Just say, oh, wow, this is really hard for me to know. I'm going to have to let that in and feel the remorse of that and decide if I want that to be different. And begin with kindness. And then maybe reach out, books, online, mentors, coaches, yoga teachers, healing professionals, peers. Begin to talk about how you would like to change that. And let the universe bring to you, what is my next right step? What is the next book or poem or song or dance that's going to inspire me to go the next step? And what was the second part of that question?
That's great. I'm not sure if there was a second part. I'll go back to it in a minute. I was just thinking about how that compassion towards ourselves and awareness fuels what you were really talking about is, listening and, that idea of intuition of, when we're in partnership with our body, we're hearing our inner wisdom.
Mhm.
I have a teacher who says the body doesn't lie,
Mhm.
you know.
Well,
Uh,
and it's important also to realize that we were raised up in hierarchies. There was a
yeah.
hierarchy in the family, and then there was one at school, and then you grow up and you get a job, and there's the boss, and right, it's all hierarchy, and we're not that skilled yet. But there are communities that are skilled in circles, right?
Oh,
In more indigenous knowledge, right? There is a way to do horizontal relating that's more inclusive.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, and actually you're doing that. And I, we could go on talking all day long. I know we could. um, so I, but I want to hear more about what you've been working on and what you're offering your women during this time, even though you have a lot going on with your certification and you're moving. I know you still have been engaged with your circle. So tell us a little bit about that and what's in the works, what's coming down the road that you want us to know about.
Yeah. Well, I used to run the Soul Spark Women's Circles in person for many years. And on the day of the shutdown here in 2020, which in California was March 17th, I sent an email to the women that I hadn't been working with in a while. I said, let's get on Zoom. And everybody showed up right then and there. And we just had a circle, a spontaneous circle. And I realized, and they realized, that we could meet just as much presence and heart on Zoom as we could in person. And so we started up the circles again, and we actually meet twice a month. It's very juicy. And I've been able to do that from Mexico, from New York, from California, and we've been able to welcome women in from other parts of the nation as well because of Zoom. Um, it's not for everybody, but a lot of people have recognized that it saves time and that you can actually get very intimate and very present and very relationally present in Zoom. So I've really appreciated that technology.
Yeah.
Cindy and I have been meeting on Zoom for almost 10 years, so on some
Right.
sort of platform, maybe it was Skype at first, right? And
Yeah.
then, yeah, or FaceTime sometimes, right? But whatever it was, we got to see and be with one another. So Soul Spark Circles, I will be inviting new women in periodically throughout the year as each curriculum ends and a new one begins. So that's always a good way. You can come to my website, which is www.maydayresilience.com, and you can actually sign up for a free resilience kit. And then we'll be connected that way, and you'll get to take the resilience assessment, which will help you to recognize where you might need some support. And then you'll know about some of the other offerings that I have as they come up.
Mm, that's awesome. That's so awesome. And I will put that in the notes. Like if I post this video, I'll make sure that it's all spelled out for people how they can get a hold of you. And I want to say that I agree about going on Zoom and how easeful it's been and how it saves time. And the other thing that I found for my women, especially women who were struggling to kind of create sacred space in their own home, that this gave them the opportunity to do that. And now many of them have dedicated space where they do yoga and they do meditation. So
Mhm.
been a lot of benefit to it.
Yeah,
Ah,
and I also like both of us, I think, have long benefited from and offered to our women, both, as receivers and givers, the benefit of being in a community, all right, over time, and also working one-on-one with a coach or a mentor who knows the particulars of your challenges and your strengths and can guide both skills that you might need to be developing, but then also how does that fit into the larger context of a circle and or the community or the world that that individual woman wants to serve. So that's another thing that Zoom facilitates very nicely, is that individual connection and then also the group connection.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of connection, this has been so incredible. I I love hearing you speak. I love when you share the wisdom you have from your heart. It is always uplifting and inspiring and insightful. And my deepest gratitude to you for being here today. Thank you, Maureen.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you so much for the opportunity. You always create such a warm and welcoming space, and
Mm.
your vibrancy is contagious, and I just am attracted to it. Thank you.
Ah, you're welcome. And that was our vibrant voice, and we'll see you again probably in a few weeks with a new guest. And signing off for now. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye bye.